In 1917, the first season of the National Hockey League took place, featuring 4 total teams, all based in Canada. The league's first champion was the club from Toronto, informally called the Blue Shirts, the Torontos, or the Arenas, though they were later renamed the St. Patrick's and eventually the Toronto Maple Leafs. They've won the second most Stanley Cups in NHL history with 13, but the last one came in 1967 when there were 6 teams. So what's it like rooting for a marquee franchise that hasn't won a title in almost 60 years? Let's find out. I'm Dan Hopper, and this is Thrill of Defeat. We are joined today by 2 lifelong Maple Leafs fans. With us is John Cullen. He's the co-host of the podcast Blocked Party, which is very, very funny. He is the co-host of What Is, a Jeopardy podcast. And he has a book coming up called Curling Rocks, which is available in Canada now and out worldwide on October 14th. John, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Curling book, huh? What brought that on?
Well, I'm a lifelong curler. I was, I guess you could say semi-pro at the game, and now I am a curling commentator. So I did a podcast called Broomgate that people liked a lot about a curling scandal, and then I got offered a book deal after that, and I said, sure, I'll write a book about curling. And so yeah, just to say, it's not out yet. It's out for available for pre-order right now.
Oh, okay, available for pre-order.
Yeah, in Canada, and then if you're in the States. Too fucking bad. Can I fuck on this? Can I swear on this?
Yes, you can.
Okay, cool, yeah.
We will not be discussing curling today. Don't worry, audience. People are about to turn this off immediately. In fact, I'm going to cut that entire part out. It's not even going to say your book. I'm going to say, it's going to be like, he has a new book, and it's just going to say, and then cut to like 30 minutes into the podcast. And you're like, I cut the whole intro of the podcast too. I just wanted to make sure that I didn't accidentally leave in a curling reference. No, I actually do like curling and would totally read that. Our other guest today, I am a big fan of his work at The Athletic. He's the co-host of the podcast Puck Soup, and he is very frequently on The Athletic Hockey Show. He's also the author of The Down Goes Brown History of the NHL. It's Sean McIndoe. Sean, thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I have no curling expertise whatsoever, other than my in-laws are super into it. So
really,
they are Western Canadians, and as best I can tell, it's a fun sport that involves drinking an enormous amount of beer. That might lead into John's stories of why his career didn't go quite as well as it could have. But
so of course, when I formed this podcast about fans experiencing lifelong sports pain, I feel like the Toronto Maple Leafs are right near the top of that list in terms of tortured fan bases. Not that I need to remind you guys. I apologize. I'm just kind of bringing our readers or our listeners up to speed, or readers if you're reading the transcript of this. But, the Maple Leafs, I can't really compare them to another team in U.S. sports. They're the first or second most valuable franchise in the NHL, maybe the biggest brand in the NHL, kind of the Yankees or Dallas Cowboys of hockey, and yet they haven't won a championship since 1967. So is there anything you can compare Maple Leafs fandom to, or give us some perspective of how big are the Leafs in Canada?
Yeah, I think Yankees and Cowboys is the good place to start. Mm-hmm. Maybe you mix the Lakers in there. And even those don't fully do it justice. Imagine the Yankees if there were only 6 or 7 or 8 American baseball teams at any given time. And then, yeah, you're right. The Lakers win pretty often. The Yankees went through a stretch, but for them, it was like 10 or 15 years where they weren't winning. Probably the closest would be the Cowboys now, where, you're going on 30 years. So I guess to put it in perspective, I would say, imagine the Cowboys, with their 30 years of not winning and all the silliness and sideshows, now double that. And that gives kind of a sense of where the Leafs are coming from.
Yeah, I think of it like exactly. Sean's exactly right. That was the first thing I thought was the Cowboys. Or you could even say the kind of fandom of the Yankees with the history of the Red Sox up until the Red
Yeah.
Sox did finally win, 15 years ago or whatever. But like, the Red Sox having that almost 100-year drought, or you could say the Cubs too. But I feel like the Cubs are sort of like that second tier of like MLB team that the Yankees and the Red Sox are maybe on that first tier. So yeah, it's like
The Cubs were lovable even when they
yes,
weren't winning. And
that's
I feel
true.
like there's a lot of adjectives we could put on the Maple Leafs
Yeah,
that
not
other fan
lovable.
bases would agree with. Lovable is not one
Not
of them.
one. No, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And we don't have the Wrigley Field of it all,
Yeah.
the sort of storied, you can still go to the ivy covered walls of Wrigleyville, or, we don't have that kind of history or love.
You can still go to Maple Leaf Gardens, but
Yeah,
it's a grocery store.
it is a
Like
grocery
quite
store.
literally, and I advise you to not do it. I went once. It was one of the saddest days of my life, and I vowed I would never go again. There is literally a spot it's like aisle 5 of the grocery store, and there's this red circle on the ground. It looks like somebody dropped a jar of tomato sauce and they haven't got around to cleaning it up. But you get there and you realize you are standing at center ice of Maple Leaf Gardens, and they just left this red circle there. But then you look up
Oh
and
my
you're like,
God.
there's like chips on sale, 2 bags for $4. And I was like, get me out of here. I never want to come back here again.
It feels like the hockey version of that, like Ozymandias poem about, finding an old pillar of stone and about like a lost empire in the sands,
There you
just
go.
like lost to
We're
the
getting
sands
the
of
right
time.
vibe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're on
Yeah.
track.
Yeah. And they won so many cups before 1967.
They did.
Yeah, still the second most in NHL history, right?
They have the second most Stanley Cups. Just please don't ask me how many teams were in the league
Yeah.
back when they were winning all of those.
Yeah, it was just them in Montreal, and Montreal won 9 out of 10 years, and then every so often there'd be like a flu outbreak, and the Leafs would get one. Yeah.
Pretty much.
Pretty much. Yeah.
So, can you also give us a little context of like inter-Canadian rivalries? Because, I know like Ottawa and Toronto have a rivalry, Toronto and Montreal have a rivalry, Edmonton and Calgary, but the Leafs I feel like are so big. There's also like a sense of kind of them versus everyone. Is that accurate? And, how do they fit into the landscape of Canadian rivalries?
Yeah, it's definitely Toronto versus everyone. There's a whole brand, the Peace Collective, that basically made a lot of money selling shirts with that exact slogan on it. I grew up in Toronto and then moved to Vancouver when I was 13. And like the Canucks fans' relationship to the Leafs is very much like that Mad Men meme. The like, I feel really sad for you. I don't think about you at all. Like that is truly so. Like the Leafs, yeah, Leafs fans would say we have a rivalry with Montreal and Ottawa, maybe Boston to a lesser extent, although that's a little bit more recent. But yeah, like Calgary, Edmonton, especially Vancouver fans will tell you that they hate the Leafs. And Leafs fans do not think about the Canucks, Flames, or Oilers at all, I don't think.
Not very much. Yeah, it is probably true to say that in Canada, maybe the second most popular team, maybe third after Montreal, is whoever is playing the Leafs that night.
Yeah.
And part of it is because, like, look, the Leafs have a massive fan base. They have not earned that fan base in any way. So when I say there's a ton of Leaf fans, I'm not passing judgment. I'm not bragging. I'm not trying to say that, look how wonderful they are. It is due to history and geography. That is it. Toronto is the biggest city. And for a very long time, it was just Toronto, Montreal, which means, so many of us get our sports from parents and grandparents. And for a very long time, English Canada was the Leafs and French Canada was the Canadians. And that was your only choice. So because of that huge fan base, which they didn't earn, but which they absolutely do have, they get an enormous amount of media coverage. And so what happens is if you're a fan of another team, you're sick of hearing about the Leafs. You turn on TSN or Sportsnet and, they're talking about the Leafs instead of your team. The Leafs get almost every Saturday night on Hockey Night in Canada. They're the national team, not, even if Winnipeg's good, even if the Senators are good, those are little markets. And so you get this thing that happens where a lot of fans have a fair, I would say, level of frustration with how much coverage the Maple Leafs get. Now, a segment of those fans take it even further and they make it their whole personality that they hate the Leafs. And as part of that, they have to pretend like they just cannot figure out why the team with the biggest fan base gets the most media coverage.
Uh-huh.
Like this is
Oh
just
yeah.
this is a mystery they just cannot crack. Like why is Hockey Night in Canada showing the Leafs instead of the Calgary Flames that have 1/10 of the fan base? And God, I can't figure it out. But it lets them get very mad, and as we know these days, if you can be mad about something, that's what sells. And so a lot of people are they have this weird Leaf brain thing. You write a piece on the Athletic about the Leafs, and it says Leafs in the headline, and there's a picture of a maple leaf, and some guy will click on it and go in the comments and be like, I don't want to read about the Leafs. And it's like, all right, dude, that's
Guess what?
then I have an easy way you could have avoided that, but
Yeah.
thank you for engaging with the work and making it so that my bosses will think that everybody loves the Leafs. So I get why someone in Vancouver would get really annoyed that their games get shifted to 3 hours earlier when they play the Leafs, when they host the Leafs, because they're 3 hours back in the time zone. The game is at 4 o'clock their time, so that it's
Oh
nice and
yeah.
in prime time. Leave. I get why that would annoy
Yeah.
somebody. I also get why they do it. Like,
Mhm.
sorry, man. There's a lot of us. Like I say, we haven't earned it. We're not any happier about it than you are, but there's a ton of us, and here we are.
I like when
Sean,
they act like it's a conspiracy too, where
Yeah.
it's a big NHL conspiracy, and they're trying to
Yeah.
shove the Leafs down our throats, and
Oh,
and
this pro Leaf conspiracy this
yeah.
league has been running. Boy, it's
Yeah, exactly.
they're doing a bang up job, man. Right? They're crushing it.
I do remember a friend of mine who works for the NHL years ago when the Leafs were in like their absolute lowest point. Because I was talking about the lottery being rigged for Sidney Crosby, and everyone likes to rip on every lottery in the NHL history is rigged. But she was like, trust me, if the league was rigged, the Maple Leafs would not suck.
If the lottery was rigged, Connor McDavid would be a Maple Leaf. So
Yeah.
like we could even just start there. They wouldn't have put Connor McDavid in Edmonton of all places that they could have put him. He
Yeah.
would be a Leaf or a Ranger. He sure as hell wouldn't have been an Edmonton Oiler. For me, that's when all the lotto conspiracies died.
The two things that died that night were conspiracy theories and the spark in Connor McDavid's eyes.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. I love the idea of Sean. I was imagining you just forcing people to read your Leafs articles like Clockwork
Yep.
Orange style, just
Yeah,
like
it's like a browser pop-up. It just takes over and it dodges your like if you move your mouse to the little X, it dodges away and everything. It's we
like
really go to a lot of that.
Winnipeg fans screaming. You're like
Yeah.
dotting, you're putting eye drops in his eyes. He has to keep his eyes open to read your like Leafs trade
Dude,
rumors column.
I don't want to read this Leaf stuff. I know
can't do it.
you've left 7 comments on my article telling me you don't like the Leafs. You're not helping right now. You're not helping your cause.
Yeah.
It's like a streamer with ads. It's like if you want an Athletic subscription for cheaper, you are forced to read all the Leafs articles. And then, yeah.
So let's start at the beginning with your guys' fandom. Where did you guys grow up, and how did you first become fans of the Maple Leafs?
Well, I grew up in Southern Ontario, about an hour outside of Toronto. And then weirdly, I don't know if Sean had a phase like this. I think Sean and I are pretty similar in age, but so I grew up in, the heart of Leafs country. I played hockey as a kid. It was like hockey is sort of a religion in the way that like high school football is in the southern United States. And I had this weird thing where when I was a kid, I wanted to like rebel against the Leafs because everybody cheered for the Leafs and it was like this big thing. And so weirdly, and this is going to suck to say right in this moment, but I was a Florida Panthers fan when they expanded because I liked the logo and the jersey. By the way, I'm like 8 years old when I'm saying this, 8 or 9 years old. So I become a big Panthers fan. The Panthers have that Stanley Cup run in 1996. I'm like following that. I'm like a big Panthers fan. And I would say the Leafs are my second favorite team, but Florida is my number one favorite team. Then when I was 13 years old, my family moved to Vancouver. And I think it was a combination of I wanted to like have this thing from home in cheering for the Leafs. And also, and Aaron and Stefan got into this when you had them on to talk about the Canucks. Canucks fans are so fucking annoying, especially about the Leafs, that I literally became like a diehard Leafs fan to spite Canucks fans. And so I like completely abandoned the Panthers once I moved to Vancouver. I became a diehard Leafs fan, and it's been basically a curse ever since. And yeah, now I'm like, dyed in the wool, diehard Leafs fan, hate every other team. So I kind of had a bit of a circuitous route to it, but I was born into to it.
I feel like the Leafs are morally punishing you for having not one, but two spite fandoms. Just like
Best motivator in sports
yeah.
is spite.
100%.
Sean, where did you grow up?
I grew up just north of Toronto. I grew up in Thornhill and was there from the age of 5, which this will sound a little bit ridiculous, but so I'm 5 years old when I get to Canada. I'm already behind, right? Like I'm already hopelessly behind on my skating and all. Like that was it for my NHL career.
Yeah, totally,
I
absolutely. You had to have been on a travel team by the time you were.
I was
Yeah,
I was
exactly.
literally playing organized hockey when I was 4 with like referees, buzzers, jerseys, like organized full rink hockey when I was 4
full
years
on
old.
bench clearing
like,
brawls and everything. Like it's
like,
that's what we do. Yeah.
Like tiny rink in the NICU in the hospital. Just like like you got it. You want a shot. You got to do it, man.
I was I mean I was a sports fan and the Leafs were obviously huge. But this was during the Harold Ballard. So Harold Ballard, one of the worst owners in the history of sports. I mean, we compared to the Yankees. He was sort of George Steinbrenner, except George Steinbrenner actually wanted to win. And Harold Ballard, we don't even really know what he wanted. Like an absolute menace of an owner. And because of that, the Leafs stunk every year in the 1980s. And so that was sort of my perspective growing up on it was, okay, this is my team, but they stink. They're always bad. I was, to be honest, in the 80s, I was more of a Blue Jays guy because they actually won from time to time and I played baseball and all of that. But then a wonderful thing happened in the early 90s. Harold Ballard died. And when we were done celebrating, we then got to watch the Leafs rising from the ashes moment where they had success in the playoffs. Didn't win a Stanley Cup, obviously, but at least looked like a real organization again. And that's what kind of hooked me in. I'm moving from fan to diehard here because finally they're good. We survived the dark decade of Harold Ballard. And it's going to be all good from here on in. And I wish I had a time machine to go back and pull myself out of that. But alas,
keep him alive forever.
For being the biggest franchise in the league with the most money, it is disturbing that in Sean and I's lifetime, we've had 2 decades where we had to like see the light coming out of a decade of horrible hockey and just like total bullshit.
That's it. The Leafs, you go to a Leaf fan and you say decade of darkness and they're like, well, you're going to have to be more specific.
Yeah, which one?
You to narrow it down on which one.
I was imagining like a championship style parade too in like Toronto, just like the streets packed and like kids are out of school for the owner dying. Like,
I remember seeing on Saturday Night Live, George Steinbrenner had said, I will never sell the Yankees. The Yankees will always be mine until the day I die. And so they started doing on the news, George Steinbrenner health updates. And I just remember one was like, I think it was Phil Hartman, and he was like reporting, and he said, he cut his hand today, but sadly the blood did clot. And the audience is laughing, but I'm just sitting there going like, yeah, that's exactly what it's like. Harold Ballard is, a terrible owner, but also a terrible person. And that, that was a big part of it too. Like you couldn't even really be like, well, he's trying. No, he wasn't even doing that. So it was a very happy day, from a fandom perspective. I imagine some of his family was sad, but the rest of us were like, okay, it's go time.
Sean, they're all listening to this.
They are.
I'm doing the cut. I like the reversal too of like, he's a great player on the field and an even better person. It's like he's a bad owner and an even worse person.
That's right.
Yep.
So as a non-Leafs fan, but a big hockey fan growing up, to me, the first time I really remember the Leafs appearing on the national stage was in the 90s when they had a series of sudden conference finals appearances. In 93, they play the LA Kings in the Western Conference Finals, and they're up 3-2 in that series, and they lose games 6 and 7 to the Kings, who go on to lose the Stanley Cup Finals to the Canadiens, actually, the last Canadian Stanley Cup. Where were you guys in 1993, and what do you remember about, I assume that was the first, the farthest you'd ever seen the Leafs get in your life, and, what was that like?
Sean, you want to go first?
Yeah, I'll go. Yeah. So here's the fun thing. It actually wasn't the first time I'd seen the Leafs go deep into the playoffs in that sense, because As terrible as the Leafs were back then, the way the NHL worked was there were 5 very bad teams in the same division, and 4 of them made the playoffs every year and then
Yeah.
played each other.
Hmm.
So the Leafs would have like a 50-point season, which is the equivalent of like having a 50-win season in baseball. Like it's terrible. But then the Minnesota North Stars would have 48 points. And so the Leafs would make the playoffs. And then who knew at that point because the teams were
Hmm.
all so bad. But it was the first time that you felt like, oh, they got a shot at this because what happens is, to back up even further, Harold Ballard dies. They hire Cliff Fletcher, who had been running the Flames for over a decade, who's considered one of the best GMs in the league. He comes in to run the show. They hire a year later Pat Burns away from the Montreal Canadiens as coach. And so now they've got actual professionals running the show, not just whoever's cheapest or whoever will put up with Ballard, but they've got one of the best combos in the league. They make the Doug Gilmour trade. Now they have a star player. They got Wendell Clark. So, you got the heart and soul, and all the pieces are starting to come together. And even then, the 92-93 season, they were a good team, but you went into the playoffs, they're facing the Red Wings. They were underdogs, and you're kind of thinking, okay, let's get, let's see what happens. They get their doors kicked in the first 2 games of that series, and you're going, okay, you know what, baby steps. This is, this is, I guess, just how it's going to go. And then they come back and they win that series. They win the series in Game 7 in Detroit in overtime. And you're just sitting there as a Leaf fan going, what is this feeling? Why am I, what I feel the opposite of how this team usually makes me feel. The corners of my mouth are going up instead of down. Like what's happening? They play the St. Louis Blues in round 2. Again, they win in 7 games. This time, Game 7 at home, it's a blowout win. They win 6-0. You're just sitting there going, this is crazy. What's going on? They end up playing the Kings. And so here comes Wayne Gretzky. And Game 1 is this classic game, and Wendell Clark beats up Marty McSorley because he knocked out Doug Gilmour, and it's just all this stuff is going on. And then yeah, you're right. They're up 3-2. They're in LA. I'm a teenager. I'm sitting there watching the game, and we get one of the classic moments. Every loser franchise has some of these stories. The Red Sox had Bill Buckner.
Hmm.
The Cubs had Steve Bartman. You go on down the list. Toronto Maple Leaf fans have the Kerry Fraser game. And Kerry Fraser was an NHL referee. It is Game 6. It is in Los Angeles. It's the middle of the night because back then the LA game started at 10 p.m. We're all watching. The Leafs are trailing the game. And then Wendell Clark, the heart and soul, the hero, every guy my age, he's their favorite player. He drags the team on his back. He scores a goal to tie the game with seconds left. Seconds left, scores this big dramatic goal. They're going into overtime. They're 1 game away from playing the Montreal Canadiens in the Stanley Cup final. Oh my goodness, this is the hockey gods have delivered. This
Hmm.
is as good as it can possibly get. And then with seconds left in regulation, Glenn Anderson takes a stupid penalty. They Kerry Fraser calls, even though hockey referees usually don't call penalties late in games. This one is so obvious that he calls it. Okay. And then in overtime, Wayne Gretzky high sticks Doug Gilmour. Blatantly, accidentally, but a very obvious high stick. It's a 5-minute penalty. It's an ejection from the game. Kerry Fraser does not call it. Seconds later, literally seconds later, Wayne Gretzky scores the winning goal in overtime. And we go back to Game 7. And even then, as a fan, you're thinking, well, we won in 7 games in the first 2 series. Maybe this is just what we do. And they lose Game 7 at home because Wayne Gretzky has what he has later described as the greatest game of his career. This is Wayne Gretzky, the guy who was unstoppable. He says this is the single greatest game. He chooses Game 7 at Maple Leaf Gardens to have that greatest game, and the Leafs lose.
Man.
And I just remember being slumped over in my living room all alone because by this point my family's afraid of me and they refuse to even be in the same room with me when the Leafs are playing a playoff game, but just slumped over and going, I will never forgive Kerry Fraser. And I've stuck to that, by the way. Still have not forgiven him.
Yeah, no, me neither. So yeah, that's definitely the earliest kind of like Leaf success memory for me. So I'm a little younger than Sean. I was 8. And I think Stefan and Aaron talked about this too, because they were a similar age when the Canucks went to the Stanley Cup final in 94, where like when you are a kid and this is happening and you don't really have a sense of like sports malaise or like how hard it is to win, right?
Absolutely.
You're just like, I'm 8 years old. My parents are letting me stay up late and drink pop and watch these games. So when they lost, like, I think when you're that age, you don't have a sense of like, oh, the refs screwed us, or oh, Wayne Gretzky had the greatest game of his life, or whatever. I think you're thinking two things. Like, first of all, you're obviously upset. Your team has lost. That sucks. But then you're also just thinking like, well, that was really fun, and this will definitely happen again, and probably again and again. I'm
Sure
8 years
did.
old, and this is already happening. And as Sean brought up, the Jays are also unbelievable at this time. The Jays
True.
win back-to-back World Series. So not only are you thinking like this will always happen, but when you're 8 and these things are happening, you're thinking like, all my teams are just probably going to win. And that's going to be so cool. Like, I'm going to love that forever. And so I just remember that in that moment, and 94 too, where they make the conference finals again and then lose to Vancouver. That's all I remember at that time. You're young and you're just thinking like, well, this will probably happen to me forever. And that's going to be great. And I'll love that for myself.
Life is a
yeah,
wonderful place full of
it's a
joy
wonderful
and hopes
place.
and
It's
dreams,
beautiful,
and always will
then
be.
yeah, and then the Jays have never won again and have lost in crippling fashion several times. And the Leafs have been basically a disaster since then. So it's awesome.
Yeah. Like you mentioned, they go back to the conference finals in 1994. They lose that one 4-1 to the Canucks. Do you remember anything specific about that series, or?
What I remember about that year is they go into the playoffs, they play Chicago in the first round, and it's the first time where now you have some expectations. Like, Chicago was a real good team, but it's like, all right, now we're supposed to win this series, and they do. And then they end up playing the San Jose Sharks in round 2. And the Sharks were a recent expansion team, had been terrible for a couple years, and then had been okay. But you're sitting there going, they're going to crush these guys. We got a second round bye. This is great. And, now by this point, as John said, it's like in the last 2 years, we've seen 2 World Series. We're on our second playoff run. The Toronto Argos are stealing the first round pick out of the NFL draft in Rocket Ismail. Like, this is like Toronto it's the greatest time to be a Toronto sports fan. And they end up playing the Sharks, and the Sharks just give them every damn thing they can handle, to the point where they're down 3-2 and they have to win game 6 in overtime. The Sharks hit the crossbar in overtime of game 6 at Maple Leaf Gardens, almost knocked the Leafs out. In hindsight, it kind of felt like the hockey gods were going, all right, guys, settle down. You're still the Leafs. But they end up winning. They win in game 7. And then they go on and they play the Canucks, and they win game 1 in overtime in Toronto. And again, you're just sitting there going, this is great. And then the Canucks just took care of them real quick in 4 games, and you're just kind of left going, oh, that's not supposed to happen to us. It's supposed to take Wayne Gretzky's great game to knock the Leafs out of the playoffs. Yeah. And but again, even then, I remember thinking, okay, this is good. This is just what we are. We're a good team now. We win playoff rounds, and I'm sure we'll win plenty of rounds over the next few years.
30 years.
Yeah, 94 is weird. And I think 94 doesn't have the Carey Fraser incident. So I think when you're like 30 years in the future, the storyline of 94 is just not that exciting. Like, I don't really remember much about it. Like, it does feel like
the sequel to your favorite movie.
Yes.
Like where they kind of did the same plot again, but just 90% is good, but not quite. And you're like, yeah, I mean, that was good. I like that one too, but it wasn't as good as
they introduced a few new characters he didn't like as much as the first.
They couldn't get Carey Fraser back. He was like, no, I'm not returning for the sequel.
The villain, it's a different villain, but it's not as good this time. Yeah, pretty much.
I will say Carey Fraser, every time at the beginning of the game, they announced the officials. And I remember in the 90s, every time they announced Carey Fraser, my dad would always go, he's the worst. And it became like a family joke where all the refs were, he's the worst. And now, like, even to this day, like, your pilot on Delta Airlines is, Nicholas, blah, blah, blah. He's the worst in my dad's voice. And
the only good thing I'll say about Carey Fraser is if your team's not going to win, it's good to have a villain. It is good to have that guy that you can point to and be like, we will never, ever forgive you. I've never met Carey Fraser, by the way. I'm sure he's a good dude. Maybe he's not. I don't know. I don't care. I don't want to meet him. I don't want to, I'd hate to meet Carey Fraser and find out he's a great dude. That would, he did an interview where he said, look, I was screened on the play and the replay shows that. And I went into the replay and I freeze framed that motherfucker and drew an arrow from where he was looking to what was happening. And I put that on the internet. And I was like, you liar. You were looking right at it the whole time. And because that's the fun of it. As a fan, like it's, I know some people might be listening to this going, yeah, well, I mean, sometimes the refs miss calls. Like, I mean, what it wasn't that he missed it in our heads, at least. It was that he saw it. He didn't have the guts to call it on Wayne Gretzky in LA. He didn't have the guts to go over Wayne Gretzky and say, you're out of the game. So he circled up and said, you know what? Nobody saw anything and you keep going. And that's my story. And I'm sticking to it because it's way too big a part of my personality at this point.
No, I think that's right for sure, though. And I also think what was working against Carey Fraser is that at that time, and I guess maybe still now, but NHL refs didn't really wear helmets back then, and most NHL refs looked like they worked a 9-to-5 construction shift during the day, and then they clocked out and they drove over to Maple Leaf Gardens and they reffed the game. And Carey Fraser had a very finely manicured coif of hair on top of his head. He was a good-looking guy. He looked younger than the other refs as well. And so that also plays into it of like, your dad saying he's the worst is like our dads would have looked at Carey Fraser and in the 90s had some ideas about Carey Fraser that we would not agree with now, but that is also, I think, adds to the lore of just like he was a pretty boy referee who didn't understand the game and didn't understand the Leafs and was afraid of Wayne Gretzky, and that's that.
I like Sean Zapruder filming the Carey Fraser non-call in front of like a courtroom of Leafs fans, and it's like in slow-mo you see him give a thumbs up to Gretzky and like wink. And you're like, oh my god.
Yeah. And by the way, I should say, like, this is I'm like freeze framing this clip off the internet of a game in 1993 that looks like it was filmed on a potato. Like you kind of have to take my word for it. It's this like ColecoVision graphics and just me. I remember just putting an arrow, just being like, I'm going to make the arrow bigger and bigger and bigger. And to this day, it's like, still out there. And yeah.
On like the old timey like microfiche in like the basement of a library scrolling through, you're like all sweaty, like, wait a minute. Yeah.
He saw it. This is not like, the old meme with the guy with the, the bulletin board and all the different strings and everything. Absolutely. I don't have that. I've got one string. It goes from Carey Fraser's eyes, or at least the pixel that kind of looks like maybe his eyes. It's, right to Wayne Gretzky high sticking Doug Gilmour. I've got, it's irrefutable.
Yeah.
You saw it, Carey. You saw it.
So the Leafs lose in the 1999 conference finals to the Buffalo Sabres, who go on to lose in the Cup finals to Dallas. And they lose in 2002 to the Carolina Hurricanes, who go on to lose to Detroit. And Vancouver lost in the finals too. What were those years like for you?
So they lose in 93, 94 in the conference final. 95, 96, they make the playoffs, but they lose in the first round each time. Pat Burns gets fired. Eventually, Cliff Fletcher gets fired. So, and then they go to 2 straight years where they're terrible again. But then they bring in Ken Dryden, of all people, the famous Montreal Canadiens goaltender, comes in and takes over as the president of the team. And they bring in Pat Quinn, big Irishman, as their coach. And they were legitimate Stanley Cup contenders for 6 straight years. Basically, 99 through 2004. They were good every year, made the playoffs every year, were legitimate Stanley Cup contenders every year, and did have the 2 trips to the conference final. This is the Matt Sundin era by this point. Wendell Clark comes back. They start playing the Senators every year and beating the Senators every year, which is a lot of fun for Leafs fans.
Really great, yeah.
But never quite gets over the hump. But even going into the 2004 lockout, okay, we're back, baby. The Leafs have been to the conference final 4 times in 11 years. They've been in the playoffs 9 out of 11. Like, the Leafs are good. Is a Stanley Cup inevitable? No, but it really feels like, they're knocking right at that door.
Yeah, I think the thing that sticks out from that, sorry, Dan, the thing that sticks out from that era for me too is the NHL does not have a cap yet. So the Leafs are also acquiring like every aging star player in the league. And some of them are still very, very good players. Like it felt like not only are the Leafs back, but finally we are doing what we're meant to be doing. We're the like richest team in the league, and we're finally acting like it. Because that was the thing with Ballard, right? Was like it was almost like he thought the Leafs were gonna like make money for him or something. Like he was very cheap, and that was part of his whole thing. So now it was like the Leafs were going, there's no cap, there's no nothing. So yeah, this 33-year-old guy who was an all-star, bring him in, and they did that with like 5 or 6 different guys. And that's how you end up with like the Brian Leach era and the Phil Housley era. And we've got Joe Newendike and Shane Corson and Steve Thomas. And we're bringing in
guys
all
are
these
lining up to
and
come
they're
play for
lining
the
up.
Leafs. They want to.
play
Eric
for the Leafs.
Lindros is holding out because he wants to be a Maple Leaf so badly. He's refusing to play for the Flyers to try to force a trade.
Totally.
Yeah.
So so that was what I remember. Is it was a really fun time to be a fan because it felt like we were good. We were beating the Senators every year, which rocked. We were signing all these old superstars, which also rocked. You're like, I can't believe this guy's on my team. And then, what I really remember about 99 and 2002, as Sean alluded to, was both times it was like not but like, damn, we're winning. We're better than the Sabres. We're definitely better than the Hurricanes. Hurricanes aren't even a real team at this point. They're the font on their numbers is crooked. They're like their numbers are in
Hartford
italics.
Whalers. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. We're gonna crush these guys, these idiots. That was the heartbreak of it. Is it was like it was fun to be a fan in that moment, but both of those years were particularly tough because you felt like going into the conference finals. Oh, we're winning. We're winning for sure.
The one other thing about that era, the Pat Quinn era, especially later in the era, so around the 2002, 2003, we talk about how there's a lot of fans out there who hate the Leafs, whether it's deserved or not. Back then, that was a very hateable team. That was, I remember Sports Illustrated, I want to say 2003, called them the most hateable team in pro sports, not just the NHL, in pro sports, because they had Ty Domi, they had Darcy Tucker was a classic villain character, Travis
Brian
Green,
Marchment around then too, maybe?
Marchment, I think, may have tagged in for a little bit. They beat the Senators every year, but then like Pat Quinn would do interviews where he would like pronounce the names of their players wrong or act like he didn't even know. Like it was like a pro wrestling heel stable. There are hateable teams out there in all sports, right? The NBA, you get it a lot. If you're a fan of that team, you love it. Bring it on. I love your hatred. I love that we're earning it. Now having 20 years to look back on it, I would rather be hated than pitied. And we didn't know it at the time, but the pity era was about to begin in Toronto.
And you also have these fans of other fan bases who are seeing their beloved greats play for the Leafs. Like if you're a Rangers fan and all of a sudden Brian Leach is putting on a Leafs jersey, you go, well, I hate them. They took away my boy.
Oh,
and so
you hate our team? You hate us. Say, okay, who's your favorite player on your team? Yeah, okay, yoink. He's ours now. Thank you. He plays for us now. We just bought him. That was the Leafs of that era.
The Leafs
100%.
have become the freshly coiffed Gary Fraser of the NHL.
Well, hey, Dan. No, some things we don't joke about. All right, that you took it too far.
I was at the game in 1999 when they knocked the Penguins out of the playoffs on an overtime goal by Gary Volk.
Yep.
You remember that? Who was a Penguin briefly and had maybe 5 goals in 2 years, something like that. Not that I've suffered much as a Penguins fan. I'm not trying to compare, but we thought they might leave town at the time. They were bankrupt and rumored to be leaving the city, and then they get knocked out of the playoffs by this generic fourth liner who used to be on the Penguins.
And
that was tough.
A moment that is this is one of the few times where an NHL team has won a playoff game in overtime, and there's a more memorable moment than the goal, which is and Dan, you probably didn't notice it at the time, but I'm sure John remembers it. As they're celebrating, they had this Russian defenseman named Danny Markov who was out of his mind. He was completely batshit crazy. And he kept looking down the ice for Jaromir Jagr and started doing the salute at Jagr.
Oh, man, yeah.
Which is just like this dude's like a third pairing defenseman. And he's going to not just trash talk the best player in the league, but he's going to do his signature like taunt back at him. And every Leaf fan saw that and was like, that's our guy now. We love him.
Well, they managed to contain Jagr in the era where 2 guys would just grab him and fall to the ice on every single play, and it wasn't a penalty.
That was allowed.
For
Open
10
field
years.
tackling was fully allowed and encouraged.
That was great. Yeah. So as Sean hinted at, the good news, the era of crushing playoff losses eventually wound down for the Leafs, and it led into the era of no playoffs ever. which I remember vividly, but after the NHL locked out in 2004, 2005, they missed a season. They came back from the lockout with a salary cap and a whole bunch of new rules to open up the offense. And coming out of the '05 lockout, the Leafs end up missing the playoffs 7 years in a row. And overall, in the 11 years after the lockout, they miss it 10 out of 11 seasons. And the 1 year they don't miss it, they lose maybe the most heartbreaking game 7 in modern NHL history. So, first, I guess take us through what was this, speaking of decade of darkness, what was it like to go from like, oh man, we're right there, but we keep losing these frustrating games to a completely hopeless team for almost a decade?
Right before the lockout, Pat Quinn is not only the coach, but he's also the GM, and the Leafs take away the GM job from him, and they give it to this kid named John Ferguson Jr. And he was sort of at the time kind of pitched as sort of like at the time Brian Cashman was running the Yankees, and he was a young guy, and like we were about to get the Theo Epstein era and that sort of thing. So this was the Leafs version of like the young whippersnapper who was going to come in and smarten them up, and it didn't work.
That's
out
always
that
worked
way.
well for us. Getting the young whippersnapper as GM has gone so good for us.
What could go wrong?
Mhm.
And what goes wrong is that John Ferguson Jr. does not end up doing a great job for whatever reason, because there was a lot of people who said that it was more the owners that he looked at this aging team and said we need to take a step back to a rebuild, and the owners went, no way, man, you got to make the
Mhm.
playoffs and put money in our pocket. But for whatever reason, they're bad.
Let's do
and
neither.
and they miss they missed the playoffs 7 years in a row. And there's this whole debacle in 2008 where they are so bad, it is now so obvious they need to rebuild, that they fire John Ferguson. They bring back Cliff Fletcher, who you might remember from the early 90s. He's now old Cliff Fletcher. It's like a Palpatine thing. He comes back and you're like, oh, okay, I don't know about
Somehow
this.
Cliff Fletcher returned. Yeah.
Exactly. And they put him in charge, and basically the story is like, okay, do the rebuild. Trade all the stuff. They still have Matt Sundin. They've got Tucker, McCabe, and Caberlet. And like, we're going to trade all of these guys. We're going to get picks and prospects, and we're going to start this thing from the ground up. And then Matt Sundin and the other players all have no trade clauses, and all of them go, you know what? No, we're not waiving. We're not going anywhere. You can't trade us. The Leafs end up getting stuck. It's this whole thing. The fans are now turning on Matt Sundin and
Mhm.
turning on the rest of them. Brian Burke eventually gets hired. He comes in. We all go, yay, here's the perfect GM for the Leafs. He's this, great personality and very smart guy and all of this. But his plan doesn't work. He's trading away draft picks and end up being big picks and all of this. And by the time 2013 rolls around, you're going, what a mess. We haven't made the playoffs in 8, 9 years. How could this get any worse? And then, yeah, sure enough, they do make the playoffs for once. And here's the thing about that series, and then I'll let John talk through what actually happened in Game 7. But the thing that people forget
Well, you go in another
about
room and scream into a pillow. Yes.
Yeah,
the
truly.
Leafs go into that series, they make the playoffs, and as a Leafs fan, you're just like, hey, we made the playoffs. Great. Boston's a better team, by the way. Boston's the
Way
favorite.
better.
We just got it. This is going to be great. We're going to get some playoff experience in that. And the Leafs end up, they fall behind in the series 3-1. And you're going, okay, all right, of course we're going to lose the series, whatever. But then they fight back and they win Game 5 in Boston. And then they win Game 6 in Toronto, and they force a Game 7. And you're sitting there as a fan going, this is house money at this point. We just pushed the mighty Bruins, who won the Stanley Cup just 2 years ago. We just pushed them to a Game 7. This is fantastic. What? Nothing can go wrong. There's nothing. Even if we lose Game 7, who cares? This is still a win. And then, John, do you want to? My
Sure.
therapist says I'm not allowed to talk about it. So
That's totally fair. I've avoided therapy, but the only thing I would say about the previous era, and Sean recapped it beautifully, is that it wasn't just that John Ferguson Jr. was a bad GM and then Cliff Fletcher afterwards, who had clearly, gone senile or whatever. It was that they were making moves that even you as the fan could understand. This sucks, right?
Yeah.
Like, and look, not every GM is going to win every trade and make the perfect draft pick every time. Yeah. But I think as a fan, as long as you can sit there and rationalize, okay, I see why they're doing this. And even if it doesn't work out, you go, you know what? If I was the GM, I would have made that trade too, or whatever the case. It was that all these decisions they were making as a fan. You're going, what are they doing? Like this trade, what is this trade? Who is this help? We're trading a first-round pick for Vesa Toskala, who no one has ever thought is a good goalie. We're giving the Bruins Tuukka Rask instead of Justin Pogge because he has one good tournament at the World Juniors. They're doing all these, signing Dave Bolland and Dave Clarkson. Like they're doing all these things where you're going like, what are they? They're stupid. They're so dumb. So that was so frustrating.
And really, they were dumb because this is the beginning of the analytics era in hockey. It came to hockey late, or baseball had already been down the path. And we had to do this whole stupid thing in hockey where we still had to have the same argument baseball had 10, 20 years ago of look up from your spreadsheet, nerds. And it's like, what? Like, but like other teams were jumping on this stuff, and the Leafs were just like aggressively, proudly stupid. Like proudly old school. No, we don't do that. We don't look at these numbers. We're all about character and grit and heart and all of this stuff. And you're just sitting there as a fan going like, do we have to be the dumbest guy in the room and proud of it?
Brian Burke's telling us that, Brian Burke's saying he wants to beat up another GM and has a fight with him in a barn and like shit like that, where you're like, what is happening right now? So then, 2013, everything Sean said is exactly right. The Leafs are so good at this, where even in a situation where it feels like found money, the Leafs find a way to kill you and hurt you. And so I'll say this, and I bet Sean will maybe agree with me, but this is how Leafs fandom goes. So the Leafs are up 4-1, and then I believe there's about 10 minutes left in the third period, and Nathan Horton scores to make it 4-2.
This is Game 7 against Boston.
Game 7 against
Boston.
In Boston.
Yep.
Yes.
In Boston. Yeah. And I believe it's Nathan Horton who scores the 4-2 goal. You can correct me if I'm wrong. I don't have it in front of me. I believe he scores to make it 4-2. And then there's about, I want to say 5 or so minutes left in the game. And Matt Fratton gets a breakaway. Matt Fratton gets it. And we're not talking like a spur of the moment breakaway. Matt Fratton has basically like a penalty shot breakaway. Like he is clear from the red line. And I swear to God, I was watching the game with my dad, I think. I turned to my dad as he is still skating down the ice on this breakaway. And I said, if he doesn't score, we're going to lose. And he did not score. And we lost. And that is like, it's everything. It's not just that like they were up 4-1 and Boston came back and won an OT and blah, 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 blah. It's like there's always just these like little moments as a Leafs fan where deep in your soul, like, if Matt Fratton scores that, we go up 5-2. There's like 5 minutes left. Boston folds up the tent. And honestly, the Leafs probably lose in the second round. Like, I mean, it's not like we were going to go on some blessed run. The Leafs only made the playoffs because it was a lockout shortened season and they started hot. So I'm not like harboring any ideas that was going to spark the Leafs to some magical cup run. But yes, it's just like any big loss we have, there's always this moment where you go, I might as well turn the game off because that's it.
Which frustrates other fan bases so much because they turn around, they're like, when you have that, it was 4-1 game, right? Because what happens is the Bruins end up pulling their goalie. They score twice in the last 2 minutes to tie it. Then the game goes to overtime. I don't even know why they played overtime. They should have just had Gary Bettman come down and be like, Boston's obviously winning. There's no reason to. They like other fans come up to you. They're like, "What? How were you feeling? Were you shocked? Could you not believe it?" And you're like, "No, at this point, no." Like I was, I was completely expecting it by that point, and it was. You're right. When Matt Fratton, and I shouldn't be mad at him because he wasn't even that good. It wasn't like this was a superstar, but he was not good. But if he scores, they win, and as soon as he misses, you go, "All right. Here we go." And you're just going to the hockey gods like, can you just do it in a creative way, please? Like, don't just have it be the same. But of course, it's, the same.
On it, Sean.
Yeah.
Watch this.
And then even worse than the fact that they lost that way is this stupid management, this proudly dumb management sees that and goes, we're on the right track.
We're close.
We're close, baby. We just need a couple of gritty veterans who would help us with the leadership so that we won't have that collapse again. And they go out and get Clarkson and Ball and all these guys.
They didn't have anyone in the locker room telling them not to blow the 4-1 lead.
Somebody should have done
No,
that,
Yeah.
right? Somebody should have
they
been like,
should have.
guys, what if we didn't blow this? But nobody thought of it.
I'm sure like I deleted all my past tweets a couple years ago, so my Twitter account only exists from like 2020 forward or whatever, but like I'm positive I have a tweet within or I had a tweet within 10 minutes of that game ending where I said something to the effect of the Leafs losing while up 4-1 is not the worst part of this story. The worst part of this story is that the dumb shit idiots who run this team are going to learn all the wrong lessons from this. And that's exactly what they did. And
They
it's
did.
that's the predictability of it. Like I said, that you as a fan, you don't want to feel like maybe you're smarter than the GMs. But yeah, they literally thought as soon as the season ended, yeah, Boston was a juggernaut. We took them to within an inch of their life. And that means, therefore, we are as good as Boston, and we were not close.
And they went on to have an off season that was so ridiculous and had so many stupid decisions that there was a Toronto based blog that did a very famous post where they basically said, would the Leafs have been better this summer if their GM was a potato? And they had all these rules, like the potato can't sign anyone, it can't trade anyone. All it can do is just qualifying offers, and they figured out that the potato would have done a much better job.
Yeah, there is a very specific sports frustration when it is, a bad GM or a bad owner. And I think it's because, even players who screw up or players who you hate, this defenseman, I hate, get him off my team. It's like, I cannot do what he can do. I can't do what
Yes.
anyone in the
Mhm.
ECHL can do. There's so many levels. Even the guys you hate are so many levels beyond my ability that, like, whenever I'm making fun of them, it's with the context of knowing every guy who's ever gone near the NHL is a million times better at hockey than I am. But there are GMs where I'm like, I could have actually done a better job than that. Like it's a frustration when like you're like, I'm just some guy and I know not to give that contract to Jeff Finger or whatever. It's like a very unique sports frustration
God, you
that's
didn't even
different
mention
than
Jeff Finger.
sorry.
Wow.
It's a different frustration than just like blowing a game or giving up a bad goal or some making an error or something like that. Where it's like, yeah, I mean, he made an error, but like he's a professional baseball player. Like,
In
Can we
fairness to
just tell
management, they thought Jeff Finger was Kurt Sauer,
That's it. The
and anybody could
story
make and
they
anybody could make that mistake. What can you do?
they they signed Jeff Finger, this defenseman that nobody had ever heard of, to this huge contract. Everyone goes, "What?" And then the new coach, Ron Wilson, goes, "Well, when I was in San Jose and Jeff Finger was on Colorado, he was the shutdown guy they used against Joel Thornton, and he was really good. And I knew at that point that this guy's a hidden gem." And people went and looked at the law, and they're like, "Jeff Finger never played against Joel Thornton. Kurt Sauer played against." And then it was like, "Oh my God, did they get the players mixed up?" Because it was such a bad cut. They gave him 3.5 million per year for 4 years. And Bob McKenzie, the most respected hockey reporter, when he tweeted it out, he had to like clarify. He was like, it's 4 years, 3.5 million for Jeff Finger. And then he had to clarify, like, it's 3.5 per year. Because people were like,
Yeah.
God.
3.5 total for 4 years? That seems a little rich. And he was like, no, man. We believe they just had him mixed up with a guy with not even a
God.
similar name. Like, just but that's the least, right? Close enough. And
For-
God bless, wouldn't you have loved to have been a fly on the wall when the agent got that call? And they're like,
Oh
yeah, we
my
really like
God.
we're going to send a contract on over. And you're just like, Jeff, sign this now, right now.
What are you doing?
Before
Get
they
in from the
figure it
lake.
out.
Get off the boat. Get in.
Yes.
Well, it is funny too because like for years this was the rumor, and I just thought, well, there's no way that this is possible. Like, there's no way this could happen. And then this is a true story, and I'll obscure some of the details. But I worked for a company where one of the guys who owned the company ended up becoming a coach in the AHL, an assistant coach in the AHL. And the NHL club was thinking about signing this UFA, and he was kind of like a fourth line guy, was sort of like a tweener. And he knew that I grew up in a town with a junior A team. And he knew that like I had played hockey with some guys that were on that junior A team. And so was this tweener guy. And this AHL assistant coach texted me to say, hey, you know some guys who played junior A with this guy. Could you like text them and see like what his deal is? And I was like, what? And then so I texted a few of my buddies and they were just like, oh, yeah, great guy. I think he could be a good NHL player, whatever. Then, like a week later, that NHL team signed that guy. And I was like, wait, did I have sort of a hand in this guy getting an NHL contract? And in fairness, he ended up being like a very decent fourth liner. I think he played probably 300 or 400 games in the league, but it was just like, oh damn, like hockey is literally like this. And when that was all happening, I was like, I do think they thought Jeff Finger was Kurt Sauer. Like that is actually what happened. It's so crazy.
We don't use these newfangled analytics like names.
Yeah, names.
Like
Look up from
names,
your name sheet, nerd.
Letters
Watch
and pronunciations of those letters. Come on.
Look up from your program, dummy.
You just see a guy and know their essence. Like you don't need to look at a spreadsheet to see what his first and last name are.
You don't need to get his to have him show any ID or anything. Just throw him 13 million, 14 million. God.
So coming out of this decade of darkness, the Leafs do end up getting a lot of high draft picks, including the #1 overall pick and taking Austin Matthews, who becomes a, star player born in Arizona. But they kind of have this new era of partial success, of being very, very good almost every single season, but losing in the first round of the playoffs 6 years in a row. Then 2 times in the last 3 years, they've gotten to the second round and lost to the Florida Panthers, who ended up going to and then winning the Cup Finals. So what is your fandom like now after going through all of these ups and downs, kind of watching this Leafs team that is very good, they're very competitive every single year, but they keep losing in the first round, and it almost became a running joke, and then they would lose in the first round the next year. Are you numb to it? Do you get your hopes up every year that it's different? How do you handle like the team at this point in your life?
I've become pretty numb to it.
Yeah.
I'll be honest with you. And I don't know why that is. I don't know if it's, like just something that happens as you get older, although it's not like, I mean, I'm old enough that this should have happened decades ago if that was going to be it. I don't know if it's because I do this for a living now and I have to look through a slightly different lens.
Yeah.
Or if they just, my real suspicion is they just wore it out of me, because there was like, I think they lost 7 times in a row in a winner take all game, which had never happened before in the history of pro sports, not hockey, pro sports. No team had ever been on like, hey, winner goes on, loser goes home games 7 years in a row and lost each time. And it's been such a weird era. And I don't even know if I should use past tense for it, because, even though they've moved on from some guys, a lot of the pieces are still there.
Yeah, for
but
sure.
It was very weird to be really good in the regular season and have really good players. And, if you took the playoffs out of it, it was one of the greatest era, the greatest era I'd ever seen. Like these teams on paper and based on regular season were better than those Pat Quinn teams or the Pat Burns teams. But then the playoffs would come along and they would just every single time choke it away in the same way, to the point where like you couldn't even get upset anymore, because it's like, how many times are you going to show me the same ending and I'm supposed to get upset? Like it's the same thing. I when they played the Bruins last year, so this is at this point the 4th time that they're playing the Bruins, and it's a game 7. And I normally, as I've said, watch the games alone. But my buddy, Ian Mendez, who now works for the Senators, he had invited me over, and we had made these plans a while ago. There were some old friends who were going to be in town for one night. We hadn't seen them in years. Like it wasn't, it was something we had to do. And so he invites me over that night. We're going to watch the game together. And he is so excited because he's like, I get to watch you watch a game 7. This is going to be great. and I really let him down, because I just kind of sit there and just watch. And even like the Leafs score with 10 minutes left to take the lead. And, I'm just like, just give it a minute, just wait. And sure enough, Boston time. And then going to overtime and Boston wins. And like, I'm not throwing things or, I'm just like, yep, that seems about right. Like at some point, like imagine if you you had like a TV show you loved, and then like they broke your heart at the end of season 1. They had some trick ending, but then they did the same thing in season 2. Like by season 7, you're not going to be like, oh no, I hope the same thing doesn't happen. You're just like, I get it. And I think a lot of Leaf fans, at least that I hear from, are sort of in the same place where it's like we're just tired of these guys. It was such a weird thing. Like I remember falling in love with terrible Leaf teams when I was a kid.
Hmm.
But I just I love Stumpy Thomas and Wendell was fighting Bob Probert and it was good. And this was a great, great team that I was just sick of. It was like
Hmm.
just get out of here, man. I'm tired of these guys.
Yeah, it's hard to square the regular season with the playoffs too, because as Sean said, it's not just the results. It's also that they're like really, really great to watch. They have legitimately three of the best players to ever put on a Leafs uniform in Austin Matthews, Mitch Marner, and William Nylander. They're scoring unbelievable goals. They're dominating opponents at times. Austin Matthews almost scores 70 goals. You watch the regular season and it's fun and they're so great and you're just basking in the glow of like, I'm alive at a time when the Leafs have this many good players. It's crazy. And then, yeah, as Sean said, honestly, it maybe hasn't been fun in the playoffs since the first year they all made the playoffs against the Capitals, because they were all young. They all didn't give a shit. They were just super fun to watch. All the kids were having fun. And then it got bleak in a hurry.
So there's not like a little part of you that in some years has been like, this Leafs team, Craig Berube, they're a little better defensively. Maybe they are different. Or do you kind of, your gut believes that, but your brain is like, no, I will not believe. They break my heart every year. I'm not rooting for this team. They won a game. I don't care.
Yep.
Like, is that dynamic there, or
look,
are you really
I'm still
truly
rooting
empty?
for them.
Yeah.
I'm still rooting for them. I'm not,
Mhm.
I'm not turning on them in that sense, but
Yeah.
there's that battle in your brain all the time. And there
Mhm.
has to be, right? Because if there wasn't that part of me going, maybe this is the year, then what's
Mhm.
the point? At
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
point,
Mhm.
pack it in and go find a different hobby.
Yeah.
Because if you can't conjure up any sense of belief, but it's the heart versus the head, right? And the heart goes,
Mhm.
maybe this is different this year. And the head goes, you dummy. Are you going to
Yeah.
really try to kick
As
this
soon,
football one more time? Are you
I
going to really
as
run up
soon
and do
as you
this?
believe it, then you get kicked. That like as soon as you're like, okay, maybe aha, fuck you. Here's the result. Like it waits
Yeah,
Yeah.
until you
pretty
believe. Yeah.
much.
I think part of it does go back to it was 4-1, where almost every season there has been some unique thing that you could point to and start to believe. Like almost every season there's been something where it'll be like we had a series where we were down 3-1 to Boston, we take it to a game 7. We have the pandemic year where we get Columbus in the first round and we go, oh my God, this is amazing. They suck. We're going to kill them. Same thing happens the very following year with Montreal. We dominate the North Division. We're like, oh my God, we're getting Montreal in the first round. And even in the back
Stop
of your mind, you
saying
go,
that, guys.
well, I know, but but that's what I mean though, is like every year they
Yeah.
do something. Like even in the back of my
Uh-huh.
mind, you go,
This
well,
time.
they lost to Columbus last year, so they could easily lose to Montreal, but then they go up 3-1 and they look
Hmm.
great doing
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
They're like
Hmm.
dominating Montreal and they go up 3-1, and then that lets you believe. And then similar thing happened this year where they go up, you think the Panthers are way better. They're the defending cup champion. And so you're like, okay, we're going to lose to the Panthers. Then we go up 2-0. We're an overtime win in game 3 away from going up
Hmm.
3-0. So every year
Yeah.
there's like these little crumbs they leave you where even if your brain is smart at the start of it, they're always giving you a little something. Even the Florida series this year is the perfect microcosm of that. So yeah, they're expected to lose to Florida. I think going into the series, Florida was like a minus 400 favorite. They win the first 2 games at home. Then they almost win in game 3 in overtime. And if they win that, they're up 3-0. They probably win the series. But they lose. They go down 2-2. Then Florida hammers them on home ice in game 5. Like the Leafs look like an ECHL team playing the
Hmm.
Panthers. And then your brain goes, well, yep, there's the classic Leafs again. They stink and they're going to lose again. And way to go, dickheads. And then game 6, they play maybe their best game of the entire year. They shut out Florida in Florida.
Nice
And
game,
then again,
dickheads.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And then again, so it's like even within one series, you're
Yeah.
like, oh, maybe we got it. Oh, no, we don't. Oh, maybe we got it. Like, and
Yeah.
then, and
Yeah.
then game
Exactly.
7 is basically an exact replica of game
Hmm.
5. They shit their pants again. They lose 6-1 in a game 7 on home ice. And you go, Okay, so that's been the problem this whole
Mm-hmm.
time, is like the last 9 years, they're always just giving you enough that your heart gets in the game.
Yeah.
And then that's what's been
Yeah.
so heartbreaking about it, I think.
I think that sums it up very, very well. Do you guys think you will see a Leaf Stanley Cup in your lifetime?
I'll say this. I don't believe in curses or anything like that. So, in theory, I still believe going forward the Leafs should have as good a chance as anyone. But there's 32 teams in this league now.
Mm-hmm.
There's going to be 34 real soon,
Mm-hmm.
and the salary cap. It's a parity-stricken league. The best I can do is look at this team and go, they've got a 1 in 32 chance. So yeah, in theory, I should see one Stanley Cup in the next 32 years. I don't know, man. I'm getting to the age where I don't necessarily have those guaranteed 32 years. I'm hitting the elliptical. I'm doing my push-ups. I'm doing all that stuff to try to stay healthy. But I don't know, man. It's I certainly don't feel like it's a guarantee. Not because it's a curse or anything like that, because
Mm-hmm.
who knows? This current era, if this team can't get it done soon, pretty soon they're going to be into the rebuild part of the cycle again. And then,
Yeah.
maybe that's 5 years. And then who knows? And the Red Sox got there finally. The Cubs got there finally. There have been, we've seen it in hockey. A lot of teams in the last decade or so have won that first Stanley Cup. The Blues finally did it. The Kings did it.
The
And
Vegas Golden Knights finally
don't
did
even
it.
talk to me about Vegas. Those front running bastard fans who've never had any misery in their
They missed the
entire life.
playoffs.
Now I can
once.
die
They
in
had one
peace.
season
Yeah.
where they missed the playoffs.
Yeah, that
so
was tough. That was really.
there is that. Yeah.
So I mean, and every time it happens, I get it's funny. I get a lot of feedback from fans who will tell me like, I don't really like Leaf fans, but you're okay. I kind of root for you. I would. And so when the Capitals finally win a cup, or the Blues, I get fans reaching out going, dude, it's worth it. You gotta stay on the bandwagon. And I'm not going anywhere. I'm not jumping off the bandwagon. But there is a part of me that's just like, I feel like I put enough misery in that my seat when for the parade, when they do finally do it, should be reserved at this point. Because, like I don't know, man. I got another elliptical session coming up tonight. So hopefully I'll let you guys know how that goes.
Capitals fans going, you guys should win the cup. It's awesome.
Yeah,
thanks.
totally.
Thank you.
Oh,
and it's great, but you're also like, am I getting pity from Capitals fans? Is that really where we're at now? Like,
God.
I'm getting a pat on the back from okay, cool.
Yeah. John?
My wife is not a sports fan, and she's always like, you could just stop cheering for them. And I'm like, no, I can't.
No.
I actually can't.
Yeah.
Like, again, it's
Not
the
an
same
option.
thing. It's like, yeah, it's not an option. It's like I'm 40 seasons into a TV show, and I'm waiting for the series finale. It's like when is it going to happen? I don't know. I mean, not to get too depressing, but like my grandmother was a massive Leafs fan. Her dad used to take her to the old Maple Leaf Gardens back in the day. She was like the biggest Leafs fan and biggest hockey fan. She almost had a heart attack in the 2002 Olympic gold medal final. Like, literally had to stop watching the game because she was
Oh my God.
getting short of breath because she was so nervous about Team Canada winning. And she was there in '67. Like, she was born in 1932. So she was there for the whole Leafs golden era, and she was so connected to the Leafs because her and her dad used to go to the games together. She was as big of a Leafs fan as you could possibly imagine. And then unfortunately she got Alzheimer's, and we always said, and she hung on for a very long time while having Alzheimer's. And we were like, and this was right when like the Leafs were getting Matthews and Marner and Nylander. And it was
Oh
like,
my God.
you know what? She's hanging on because the Leafs are going to win one more before she goes. And she died 5 years ago. So, that's kind of like, I know that is like a depressing thing, but that is genuinely how Leafs fans think about this team. Like, I think that is a very accurate distillation of like how I would answer this question is like, are they going to win a cup in my lifetime? I don't know, but I do know that like there is no cosmic force that's going to keep me alive until they do it. It might happen, but it is very possible that I will live a very full and productive life on this earth. And one of the things that will be missing from my life experiences is the Toronto Maple Leafs winning the Stanley Cup. And I've made peace with that.
And you know what the sad thing is? That we've just watched the Florida Panthers win 2 cups in a row. The Lightning won 2 cups in a row. The Kings won 2 and 3. Like, on down the list. if you cornered every Leaf fan over the age of 30, let's say, and you said, you get one the rest of the way, but only one. Do you want to take the one, or do you want to say, you know what, let's see, maybe it's 2 or 5 or 10? I feel like every Leaf fan would be like, you know what, just give me the one. Am I going to be young enough to like the cataracts won't be too bad? I'll be able to watch. Okay, give me the one, and I'll check out. I'll be happy. And we're not greedy, hockey gods. We're not asking for a dynasty here. We'll take one.
Like if they win one when I'm like 50 or whatever, I might just stop watching altogether.
Yeah,
that might
we're
be
all
what
I'm out.
frees me from this prison, you know?
98-year-old John in the hospital on your deathbed, and the Leafs go up 4-1 against like the Houston Ice Cats. Mm-hmm. And then Mitch Marner III misses a breakaway, and you just go, no, immediate flatline, and that's the end of your life.
I'll be the guy in the hospital, Game 7 overtime, and it'll be they score, the Leafs win the cup, and it'll be that flat line of like, all right, he's gone, and then it'll be like, we have an instant replay review of an offside, and then it'll start beeping again, like as the one eye opens, and
as you're ascending to heaven, you realize, they're a millimeter offside, and it's going to overtime, right. And you're like,
St. Peter at the pearly gates, come on in. I'm like, hold up, I gotta go back. I gotta go. I might see again. But
he's like, the game's going to overtime. You're like, I don't even need to see it. I'm just take me to the afterlife. He's like, I don't know. The Leafs have some momentum. He's like, no, I've seen this before. Just put me in limbo. I don't care. Just get me out of here.
Pretty much. Yep.
That's our show for the week. Thanks again to Sean and John for trapping us in the hellish mind prison of being a Toronto Maple Leafs fan. We'll be back next week with an all-new show on Tuesday. And if you like the show, hey, please leave an iTunes review or just tell some people about it. Thanks so much for listening, everyone.